Welcome, everyone. I am John Ryan, and I am pleased to have David Bearman. He is the Chief Content Officer at the Pro Football Network, a guy you want to definitely follow. I've had the privilege of working with David over the years, mainly in PGA, and he's an awesome guy in that too. And I can tell you honestly that he is the best DFS golf guy I have ever worked with. In fact, I remember in the Players Championship when Fowler went off, you and I were in the top 15 in that $1 million thing and really like excited as all get out, but that still remains my best showing in DraftKings PGA. So thanks to you for that back in the day there. So welcome to the show, David. How are things going for you at the Pro Football Network? And I understand you're really hitting on all cylinders with your best bets.
Yeah, it's been fun. You know, the year has started, you know, from the last time I talked to you, I was working at ESPN covering all sports betting content, and now moved over to Chief Content Officer of Pro Football Network, covering all things pro football. Obviously, we're 4 weeks into the season, so we're getting a little bit of an idea of who's good and who isn't, or who should be good and who isn't. We got articles coming out actually later today on a new metric that we're releasing that basically is measuring how much luck has been involved in teams' wins versus their expected value. So you'll see that later today, comparing a certain team this year to the Philadelphia Eagles of last year, who started 10-1, but maybe should have been 5-6 or 6-5, and then it all came crumbling down. So that'll be a little bit of a tease for the article that we'll release later today.
That's awesome news. And I must start out the show here with the Circa. Circa Survivor, again, for the 5th consecutive year, has experienced some serious carnage. This year was the record. We had 95% of the entries. There was 12,800 entries, each paying $1,000 per entry, eliminated. And fortunately, I was on the Patriots against the spread, not in the eliminator, obviously. But they upset the Bengals in week 1. Then the Raiders upset the Ravens on the road in week 2. Week 3, Washington destroyed the Bengals, eliminating essentially 75% of the field just in those 3 plays. You add on the loss by the Eagles, where Nick Sirianni, I think, forgot to throw that chart away, because it is really driving me nuts, these metrics. I mean, you and I are analytical guys, but the problem I have with going at it on 4th and 4 or 4th and 2 in the red zone is, if it's a low-scoring game, David, why in the world don't you just take the points? If it's a game where the game flow is, it's 21-17 and it's the second quarter, or it's Georgia versus Alabama, you can't kick a field goal then, because you're going to fall behind on the scoreboard. So I think Nick's in a little bit of trouble here, but they're fortunately on the bye week. What do you think about these analytics and looking at a chart? I mean, do you think Lombardi would have ever looked at a chart to tell him where to go or not to go, or Landry would have done that, or Don Shula, or any of the greats?
No, but the game has evolved. And listen, I'm not going to come down on analytics, because I believe in it and I use it to make my picks. We use it in articles. We're developing an analytics department at Pro Football Network with all these metrics. So I'm all for analytics. But I think where the line needs to be drawn is you're in the middle of a live game. You're in the middle of action. There's momentum. There's injuries. There's stuff that you can't fit into a chart. You just can't. And whether it was the right move or wrong move to go for it on 4th, I mean, ultimately Barkley makes that catch. It's a completely different conversation. That's what I think the fallacy is in relying on metrics one way or another, is there's still a human element. Like, Nick Sirianni is a genius if Saquon Barkley catches the ball. And Mike McDaniel's a genius if Tyreek Hill doesn't drop a wide receiver screen the other day that changes the momentum of the game. So these things happen over the course of the game, and I think you really got to make the decision in the moment with the data you have and the feel that you have. I personally would have kicked the field goal if I was Nick Sirianni. I would have. And you just got to look at it every which way. And I think the problem with the Eagles goes a lot deeper than one play. Like, they had a stellar defense last year. You bring in Vic Fangio, who needed to leave Miami for a little bit of a change of scenery after a debacle of 1 year there on his defense, and everything said he was going to solve everything in Philadelphia. Well, their defense has been downright awful. I mean, they let Baker Mayfield and company go up and down the field against them on Sunday. So I think the problem goes beyond Nick Sirianni. And listen, he hasn't done a good job of keeping the clubhouse together. We've heard it. We've seen it. You don't just have a 10-1 collapse and make it up the next year. And listen, I've always had the adage, and I had a buddy tell me this one day, when the Falcons blew the lead in the Super Bowl. You have a 28-3 lead and you blew the Super Bowl. I had a buddy who told me I would fire Dan Quinn right there. Fire him right there. You don't come back from that. Now, you're not going to fire a team that is 10 minutes away from winning the Super Bowl. You're not going to fire that coach. But his point was they will never recover from that. So why prolong the inevitable? You know Dan Quinn's going to get fired eventually. So let him go now and try to change the scenery. Same thing in Philadelphia. They lost from 10-1 to finish 11-6 and get blown out in the playoffs at home. You are on the road. Sorry. You're not going to rebound from that. And you're seeing that right now. It's the same team. If they got even better, if you ask me, talent-wise, they got better. And they're having the same problems. Jalen Hurts is fumbling all the time, throwing bad picks. The defense is not playing up to their standards. They're quitting on each other. This Philadelphia Eagles team is not going to win a Super Bowl with Nick Sirianni. So why not make the change? Now, not all Eagles are created equal, but you're just not going to come back from that, and you're seeing that this year.
Yeah, we're having Eytan Shander coming on the show, having a little connection problem with him, but hopefully he'll come on. He's from Fox 29 Philadelphia, and we'll provide some more insights into the Nick Sirianni saga, because I firmly thought ahead of the bye week would be the perfect time. If you're going to pull the trigger and fire him, then that's the time to do it, because you have 2 weeks to recover till you play the Cleveland Browns, which is one of those teams, Jekyll and Hyde, every week. You just don't know what you're going to get. So we'll wait for him to come on if he can make it, hopefully, and then we'll talk more Eagles. But let's transition here to the Dolphins, which is your favorite team. And it was dreadful seeing Tua get another concussion. I feel strongly that he should retire before something really goes bad. And as we know now, it doesn't go bad right away. It can go bad 20 years from now, and he won't know who his grandkids are. And that would be really, really sad for anybody to experience. But we also know, being former athletes, that it's very hard to say, I'm done with this sport. So I get the whole thing, but I want him to be safe. In terms of this game coming up against the New England Patriots, this is a game I think the Dolphins can win. This line actually opened as a Dolphins price as a 3.5-point favorite before the season started, David. And now they find themselves as a 1-point underdog, which is pretty amazing. And it's all because of Tua and a multitude of other injuries, of course, but mainly Tua is the reason why the line moved. The total, which we talked about before we went on the show, opened up preseason 45.5 points. And now, because of the recent performances of them, it has plummeted to 35.5 points. Both teams are 1-3 straight up, supporting the Dolphins. I'll start out with this, David. You can go against it or you can agree with it. The Dolphins here is an excellent betting system, 27-37 straight up, 40-23 against the spread for 64% winning bets. And it's simple. You're going to bet on dogs, including pick. The favorite in this matchup committed 3 or more turnovers in their previous game, which would be the Patriots. And the favorite is forcing an average of less than 1 turnover per game on the season. And the game occurs after week 4 to the end of the season. And the reason I use week 4 is because you need to have a decent sample size to be able to make any meaningful connections with the averages, such as under 1 turnovers per game. So this really supports the Dolphins here to get a much needed win. Now, broadly, David, do you think your team, the Dolphins, have enough left in the tank that they could make a push to the playoffs?
Oh, there's a lot of comments, a lot of points you made there that I want to hit on. Do I think the Dolphins can make the playoffs? Yeah, Tua comes back. I think they do. Without Tua, this is not a playoff team. And we said that last year, the year before, and the year before that. Without Tua, and the way the system is run, and the way that the general manager and the head coach not prioritize backup quarterback or offensive line, this team will not survive and make the playoffs. Now, Tua comes back, and you got to look at it. They play New England, who they can beat. They have a bye week. Play an Indianapolis Colts team that they can beat. At that point, Tua is due back. If the Dolphins win those games, and I'm not saying they're going to, they're 3-3 with Tua coming back. currently in the AFC, that 500 is, I mean, I know you can't finish 500 because it's 17 games, but that would make the playoffs. I think 9-8 will make the playoffs this year. Everybody's jumbled up. There's only a couple of good teams in the Bills, the Chiefs, and maybe the Texans. Everybody else is just muddled up. The Ravens might make a break and win that division. All of a sudden, you got your division champs, and then the 3 wild cards are going to come down to whatever crap gets to the top. So you're not going to see many teams at, wild card at 11-5 or 11-6 because there's just too many average teams. As far as the Dolphins are concerned, I don't want to hit too much on the Tua retirement thing. First of all, I'm not a neurosurgeon. I'm not a concussion specialist. And I've been asked this question 7,000 times over the last 3 weeks. I'm not going to make the decision. I'm not going to tell him what the decision is going to be. Only him and his family could do it. I know that if I was in this position, I'd hang it up. If my son was in this position, I would have him stop playing football. But I'm not Tua. I'm also not looking at leaving $200 million on the table. So I'm not in that position, so I won't make that decision or tell him what he needs to do. I will tell you, though, that without Tua, this team is not good. Your system makes total sense if all things are created equal, but you're looking at a Dolphins team who brought in a quarterback a week ago who was dreadful the other night, who has wide receivers already screaming and yelling on the sideline, and an offense that seems to be going backwards. Now, Mike McDaniel promised changes. He's looking himself in the mirror. Is he going to make the relative changes that are needed to turn his things around? Well, he hasn't proven that yet. He has proven that with the right people and the right quarterback and the right system, they're as good as any offense in the history of football, having scored 70 in a game. And last year, they're on pace to shatter every single record possible. But he's also shown that when things start going the wrong direction, Tyreek Hill misses a game, Jalen Waddle misses a couple of games, few offensive linemen go down, he can't run the same offense. And he has yet to show anybody that he's able to adapt his game to the personnel that he is given. With Tua and Waddle and Hill and Mostert and Achane, it's the best offense anyone's ever seen. People aren't all created equal, and he has not been able to prove with Skylar Thompson, with Mike White, with Tim Boyle, and now Snoop Hundley that he can run this offense. What we saw on Monday night against Tennessee was just an abomination of embarrassment. And with that type of game plan, they'll lose to New England. They'll lose to Indianapolis. Then they'll have to make a decision on whether to punt on the season and bother risking Tua. I personally think they're going to change things up. New England's not a good football team. You brought up your system, and I'm just not going to play the side of this. I can see Miami winning by 1 million, and I can see them not even showing up and losing by 1 million. That being said, if you look at the stats and you look at the hardcore stats, scoring, Dolphins last, Patriots second to last. Yards per game, Patriots last, Dolphins fifth to last. Yards per play, third to last, second to last, on and on and on. EPA, 28th and 32nd. Dreadful. Both offenses, New England's offense has been bad the whole year. They won their first game with defense. The Dolphins have been bad without Tua, and even with Tua, the offense wasn't doing well. I don't see these two teams reaching the total of 35.5 if they played 8 quarters. This year, I've done 7 unders. I'm 6-1. The one under I missed was last week when I played on Anthony Richardson playing for the Indianapolis Colts, and he got injured, and Joe Save the World Flacco comes in there, and they put up 1 million points, and therefore the other team had to come back. The Steelers had to fight from behind, and they start scoring points. That game is totally different if Anthony Richardson doesn't get injured, as we've seen the first week of the season. Had a good read on the totals this year, 7-1 overall with the total, 6-1 on unders, 1-0 on overs. I don't see this game reaching 35.5. The last 4 times these two teams met in Foxborough with players a whole lot better than what you'll see on the field on Sunday, they didn't get any higher than 44. They had 32, 33, 41, and 44. There was a 27 in there in Miami one time. These two teams don't score a lot of points to begin with. Now they're playing with backup players, injured players. I just don't see it going very high.
I don't either. You have 2 offenses, like you said, total combined is like 22 points. My predictive model shows an 82% chance that neither team scores 17. So it looks like they're going to be playing in the mud, so to speak, and it's going to be points where a lot of field goals, I think, David. I think if there was a prop bet for over total field goals in the game, I think I might take that bet. But everything else has to be focused on the under. It is tempting. The amateur bettor is going to see 35.5 and think, oh, wow, this is contrarian bet, so to speak. And they're going to be tempted to do the over. Because what do amateurs do?
John, I'm on VSiN every single Wednesday night at 10:30 at night. And we always joke about it. There's no number that's too low for me to bet. They'll start off a segment by saying, hey, it's Colts versus Browns 37.5. Is the Undertaker going under? Damn straight I'm going under. Like, a bad offense is a bad offense. Now, things can go wrong. If you had the under in the Dolphins-Titans Monday night game, you got royally screwed when the Dolphins took a safety that had the most ridiculous penalty I've ever seen on the free safety, on the free kick, onside kick that violated some rule no one ever heard of, and they gave the Titans the ball at the Dolphins' 10-yard line. And the Titans had too much time to take a knee, so on 4th and goal, they ran it into the end zone with Pollard, and it went over the total. But that took extreme measures for that to get over 37. And it's the same Dolphins team, and the Patriots are a whole lot worse than the Titans offense. So look what it took for that game to break 40. Yeah, crap could happen, and you could have a safety with a minute and a half to go, followed by some ridiculous 55-yard penalty that puts the ball on the 10-yard line. I just don't see it. Neither team is any good right now. And I look at it as Army, Navy, and Air Force.
There you go.
Play each other every single year. And if anybody who's followed college football, anytime those teams play, the under is somewhere in the neighborhood of 28-2 over the last 10 years. They can't put the number low enough. You and I were betting it when it was at 42, 43. I bet under 28.5 last year and hit it. So, yeah, there is an element that they're going to score on accident. There could be a pick six, a scoop six, a pass interference penalty on an 80-yard throw. Anything can happen. But these two teams are combined 24 points per game. And by the way, they also have good defenses. The Miami Dolphins defense is one of the highest ranked defenses in the NFL right now. It's just that they're on the field for 40 minutes at a time because the offense is so dreadful. All the Dolphins defense did last week was give up a bunch of field goals and then that late touchdown that didn't make any sense. So
let's go back to the Eagles here quickly with the time we have remaining. Unfortunately, Eytan won't be able to make it this week, but we'll expect them next week. The concern with the Eagles is the lack of chemistry from the coaching staff. I remember back in the 80s when I was in the master's program, and there was a book, Tom Peters, In Search of Excellence. And in that book, the theme was that the character of a team, the character of an organization takes on the character of the leaders. And nothing is more true. And it's stuck with me, all the years of my life so far. And what I see here is when you have an organization that's not functioning in the C-suite, so to speak, it transcends to the most basic employee of the company. And I saw it clearly in that previous game where the defense comes out and has no clue and allows Mayfield to go straight down the field, score, and then there was no response. It's 24-0, and you're a contender for the Super Bowl, and it seems to be I hope for Eagle fans it's not as big a problem as I think it is, but I think it's monumentally bad right now, and they do have a bye, which is good news because I can give you a couple stats on that, David, with Sirianni here is actually pretty good coming off the bye. Sirianni is 4-1 straight up against the spread and 3-1 when favored coming off the bye. Eagles 32-12 straight up, 28-16, 64% off the bye. Sirianni is 11-2 straight up, 7-5 against the spread as a home favorite of 6 or more points as the Eagles head coach. But here's the bad. Sirianni is 0-5 against the spread following a loss of 14 or more points and 0-5 when facing below average passing teams, averaging 5.7 or lower yards per pass attempt, and also 0-5 ATS when facing a team with a losing record. So that defense is really, really bad. That's what we expected to see before the season started. The offense is just anemic, and that was supposed to be the part of the team that was going to score 35 points a game and just outscore every single opponent on the schedule. So in the minutes we have left, David, what do you think the Eagles need to do during this bye week so that they actually will have a chance to beat Cleveland, who I'm actually betting this week against Washington for what that's worth? I think Cleveland is one of those teams that any given week, any given Sunday, Cleveland can win a game. So what do the Eagles need to do to prepare for the next game and get this ship back on track?
Fire Nick Sirianni and hire Bill Belichick as head coach. I mean, we laugh, but I look at the Eagles in totality. They lost 5 of their last 6 games last season, 6 of 7 if you count the playoff game. They went to Brazil and barely beat the Packers, a game they easily could have lost. They blew the lead versus the Falcons in embarrassing fashion. Saints game was as ugly as it gets, and they survived based on a last-second touchdown. And then they got blown out of the water for Tampa Bay. So I have yet to see anything positive out of the Philadelphia Eagles since they were 10-1 in the middle of last season. And even then, I went to the Eagles-Dolphins Sunday Night Football game last year where they snuck one out against the Dolphins. And not to make excuses, but the Eagles got called for absolutely 0 penalties, including a brutal face mask that was not called. Like, that Eagles team last year was not a 10-1 team. Our metric that I talked about earlier had them at basically 5.2 wins instead of 10. All the money in the world should have been bet on that collapse. Nobody predicts the collapse, but our metric, which we did not have until this year, going backwards, it predicted that collapse. And they have not recovered since. And I don't think they have the right people in there. You have Sirianni, who obviously has made some bonehead decisions and doesn't seem to have the ability. This is not a 4-game sample size. This is a 11-game sample size.
Agreed.
And I saw the Vic Fangio show last year in person at the Miami Dolphins fan. I saw it. He's not the answer. Fangio is going to go down as one of the greatest defensive minds ever in the game. He's not it now. His scheme doesn't work anymore. It didn't work last year, and it ain't working this year. So when your head coach and your defensive coordinator are not doing well, like, I don't see it progressing moving forward. I think you're going to see the same crap out of the Eagles all season long. This is a team that could legitimately finish 9-8, could finish 7-10, or they could finish 15-2 if they right the ship. They have the talent to do so. We know that. I just don't think they have the right people in charge.
Yeah, and that's part of the leadership. It starts with the top. No question about it. I really fear that they're, if they don't go 2-0 coming out of this break, I think Sirianni's gone. But that doesn't fix the problem. It really doesn't, because it's going to take time, as you said, to overcome what happened last year. And, Jalen Hurts looks like a deer in the headlight now most of the time when he doesn't have A.J. Brown on the field. So I can't support them in a bet next week, despite the fact that Sirianni has a decent track record coming off the bye. And to that point, that data reflects different times before that collapse last year. So when you're handicapping trends and angles, you have to be really careful, for the people that are just starting betting out there. You can't take a trend that's 15-2 and assume that it's going to be 30-4, because it reverses at some point. You rarely get to a trend that even gets to 15-2 that has any merit or meaningful value in terms of betting it again. So just cautionary fact about that. So
except for the unders and academy games.
Yeah, in Iowa last year, I think we bet Iowa, what was it, 21.5 and 24.5, I think it was, before the game started.
Year, all of a sudden this year, they're like 5-1 to the over. So,
different personnel, it's the big 18 now. But that's a topic for a different show, I guess. But we're at the end of the show, David. I'm going to go with the Cleveland Browns this week to get the job done against the Washington Commanders, who I do think is the best team in the NFC East right now. But I think, it's an up and down Jekyll and Hyde NFL type of landscape right now. And why is that line only 3 points, with Washington coming off a huge win, which was my 10-unit game of the month, by the way, humbly stated. Haven't had one of those covered by 30 points ever, but it did. And we'll always take it. What do you think about the card this week? I know you'll put out your 4 best bets later tonight on VSiN at 10:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, but what do you see now?
The 2 I'm focusing on right now is the Dolphins Patriots under, which I gave out earlier. I also am trying to figure out why the Vikings are only a 2.5-point favorite against the Jets. I know it's in London. It's not at home. But from what we've seen from these 2 teams, the Vikings seem to be a much better team in all the metrics and all the standards, including the eye test. I don't think the Jets are a very good team, so I'm leaning on the Vikings. And then I have to look at the rest of the card, which will come out tonight on VSiN.
And lastly, Bo Nix had minus 7 or 8 yards at the half in that Jets loss, and the Jets couldn't win. And it was a dreadful win that has to be shocking to that team. So I agree with you that they probably don't bring much to London in a way of a bounce back, in my opinion. I would take Minnesota, who is playing on all cylinders and actually looking like a juggernaut. I would much rather take them. Well, David, comes to the end of the show here. Thank you for your time, and make sure everybody you get over to the Pro Football Network. It's a tremendous site. I especially use it for their great injury reports, which are always 100% accurate, and a whole bunch of other tools and great writers over there that you'll benefit from and become a more astute sports bettor. So until next week, on behalf of David Bearman and myself, remember to always bet with your head, never over it, and may all the wins be yours.